Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm joined today by Jeremy Miner. He is the founder of Seventh Level, and he's on the other side of the aisle. We'll talk about the relationship between sales and marketing, because, companies always talk about them at the same time, but they're different disciplines. They do different things. So, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us.
Eric, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure being on your show. Atlanta, Georgia, the cool guys, only the cool guys live in Atlanta. That's where everybody's moving. Everybody keeps telling me, like, move. You gotta move to Florida or Georgia and Atlanta. I don't know why.
Well, there's a lot of people here. It's definitely.
You guys must be doing something good.
Yeah, we need to put a sign though. We're full up because we just keep
on up.
Yeah,
no more.
Yeah, we keep adding lanes and things, and I don't think that's the way to fix the problem. But whatever.
That could be trouble. There you go.
Yeah. So, Jeremy, you said you're out of Scottsdale.
Yeah. So our USA headquarters here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I would say beautiful Scottsdale, Arizona, but right now it's really, really hot.
Yeah.
If you're in the summertime area, but in the fall and the spring and the winter, it's really gorgeous. And then we have our international headquarters of our company in, of all places, Sydney, Australia. So we're pretty much open 24 hours a day.
I like it. I did a project one time with an agricultural company. I owned a research company before this, and I was in Minnesota in February on a farm, and it was like 0 degrees. And the week after that, I was in Scottsdale, and it was like 72, and I was sitting outside eating salad. It was amazing. I loved
You probably had shorts, a tank top on.
Yeah.
Even at 65 degrees, in February, we have like coats on, scarves, boots, because we're freezing at 60, 65 degrees. And the tourists that come in, they're all wearing flip-flops and shorts. It's like a thing here.
Yeah. So talk to me about sales. So how did you get into the sales game? Like, you just naturally born, or is it something you learned along the way?
Well, and unfortunately for me, I was not born out of my mother's womb with advanced questioning skills. I was not born out of my mother's womb with like advanced tonality skills. And, I can't believe it, but for some reason, God did not have me be born with advanced objection handling and prevention skills. I just had to acquire all those skills. I cannot believe it that he would not just make me a natural born salesperson. What was he thinking?
So, but did you pick, people either pick sales or they fall into sales. So did you pick sales as a...
Well, I played college baseball.
Okay.
And my junior year, so it was like the end of my junior year in college, and my major was behavioral science and like social dynamics.
Yeah, okay.
Which I know I'm a weirdo, but like
that's a good background for sales. That's great.
Probably say that it gives you an advantage, but I started learning about how the human brain works, and especially with social dynamics, why people do what they do. Like, why do they say yes instead of saying no? Like, why do they see a sign and go left instead of going right just because they're told? Like, why does the brain function the way it does, right? Human behavior 101. And so end of my junior year in college, so I played baseball. I decided to get married. I'm divorced now, but I got married very, very young and had a baby on the way. My beautiful daughter, Cammie, who's a senior here at Arizona State University. I was really young when I got married.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to start working because I had a child on the way. The baseball scholarships were not going to pay for that. And I wasn't good enough to go pro, unfortunately. There you go. And so I had to get a job somewhere. And I remember my roommate at that time, because I wasn't married yet, so I was still living in the dorms or these apartments with like 3 or 4 other dudes. And my roommate comes in and he's like, dude, you got to check it out, man. There's this like meeting up at the campus and they're giving out free pizza and you can make all this money in the summer and then you don't have to work while you're going to school. I'm like, well, let's go check it out.
It's like good pizza, right?
You walk in there, there's like 150 people or so. And they gave it's all awesome. It's so easy to sell. You're going to make all this money. You're going to make enough money in the summer and the 3.5-month summer that you don't have to work at all during school. And I'm like, this is great. I can go out and make 40 or 50 grand in the summer. That'll be enough to, and this is like 2001, things were a little bit cheaper then.
Yeah.
And so everybody signs up pretty much because it's straight commission. So they just, they hire everybody. And basically, about a month and a half later, because they move you out to all these cities, like out in the United States. And they sent me and like 25 other guys to Boise, Idaho, of all places. And, I still remember they drive you out in the van and basically like kick you out of the van. And they're like, hey, go make some sales. It's going to be easy. We'll pick you up after dark. And that was like my first experience. I actually still remember. It's funny because I remember like looking back at my sales manager, that image just came to my mind. His name was Xane Anderson. Xane, he had this curly blonde hair. And he's like, hey, man, remember, be excited when you knock on the door. Like, show them how much you believe in the product. And they're going to believe it, and they're going to want to buy from you. And it was selling alarm systems.
I was about to ask, were you selling knives? Yeah. Was it long distance?
No, it was alarm.
So
it was alarm systems, door to door. So I started knocking on doors, and I was really excited. And I was, talking about the features and benefits and how we had the best this, and we were the #1 market leader for this, and how I was going to do all this great stuff for them. And I started noticing from the very first store, I started getting all these objections. Like, we don't need it. We can't afford it. Your price is too high. We already talked with somebody from your company. We already have something for that. I need to talk to my spouse. I need to think it over. I'm interested. Leave me information. Can you call me back a week, a month, a year later, right? And I started noticing it was like every single door was saying that. And I'm just like, what? I thought it was supposed to be easy. And I remember, gosh, it was probably 7-8 weeks into all that stuff, barely making any sales.
Yeah.
And when you're straight commission, you don't make any sales, it's no good. You might as well work, minimum wage because you can make more there. And I literally remember this. I was thinking about this before I got on this. I remember standing on a curb. I think it was like maybe a Friday or Saturday night, because you had to work 6 days a week at that job, right? You're talking like 14 hours a day. Standing on the curb, waiting to get picked up late at night. You're talking about middle of June, July. You imagine Atlanta in the middle of July. You're sweating to death. Boise's not as bad as Atlanta, but you're still sweating to death. You got sweat. Your legs feel like jello. If anybody hearing us or listening, it's like, if you've ever done door to door, your legs feel like jello at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I had made 0 sales for that day. So I made $0. And in fact, that week I had made 0 sales. And this was like 8 weeks in. Okay. And I'm sitting here like, what am I doing? I was making all these excuses. Maybe I'm just not, maybe I wasn't a born salesperson, because that's what I thought was true at that point, that you were just born with these magical skills or not, the gift of the gab. Maybe I just have the gift of the gab. I'm too introverted. Maybe selling just wasn't for me. And I remember getting in the van that night, and the manager popped in this Tony Robbins CD.
Yeah.
I know it's crazy to think about, for everybody younger, 20 years ago, they used to listen to these round things called CDs. It's like a miracle, And Tony, he said something like this. I could be butchering it, but he said, you will fail if you don't, if you don't learn the right skills necessary to succeed. Like, you will fail if you don't learn the right skills. And he went on to say that everybody is taught skills, like everybody, but the people who fail are the ones who are not taught the right ones. And he started talking about that there was differences in skill level and what you're taught. And I mean, granted, I was a 21-year-old kid. What did I know? But that was the first time I ever started to conceptualize that there were differences in skill, ability, and level, that there were some skills that were far more effective than other skills in selling, right? And so I was like, okay, that makes sense. Maybe what this company is training me and what I was learning from the sales gurus at the time, maybe they just weren't the right skills. Maybe they were outdated and didn't work as well anymore. So I took that to heart. And so, at the same time, I'm here studying human behavior and social dynamics.
Yeah.
One of my professors, I don't know if you ever heard of Robert Cialdini?
No.
He has he's the head of behavioral science here at Arizona State University, actually, but he has a best-selling book. It sold millions of copies, called Persuasive. Look it up. It's a really good book about how the brain works. Yeah. Persuasion. And my professors, like Robert and other professors I was studying from, they were saying to me, because I was asking them about sales, and they were geeking out on this, because they'd never sold, but they had studied the brain. And so they were saying hey, the most persuasive way to communicate is over here. But when I read the sales gurus books, they were saying it was over here. It was completely opposite ends. I'm I was so confused, because I'm what am I supposed to do? I know how the brain works, but the sales gurus, I don't think they really understand how the brain works.
Yeah.
Because I would notice I would use some of the things they would say, and I'd make a few sales here and there, but I also noticed when I used a lot of their techniques, I would notice that the prospect would the wall resistance would come up. They would sales resistance would come up, and And I noticed that they would, because I would look for this, that they would like emotionally shut down. They would say surface level. And when I asked questions that I thought were good, they would just give me like vague, generalized surface level answers. So I'm like, why is that? Because they have a problem and I have a solution to solve it, but why are they emotionally shutting down? And instead of blaming the prospects, my professor's like, you need to like look at what you're saying with your tone and like your body language and like what you're asking, because that's actually triggering something in their brain called fight or flight mode. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? Nobody else in the books was talking about that. And so I started learning from them and just in the trenches, like how to get my prospects to really do all the work. You know, because when you read sales books, they're like, hey, you got to do all the work. You got to do all the persuading, the chasing, the convincing. You got to overcome their own objections. These rebuttals, you got to close. But I started to like see that was only going to get you to a certain level. And that was it. I was going to have to play a numbers game the rest of my life, knock on thousands of doors, make thousands of phone calls to make a few sales. Like numbers game it was going to be. But I was like, man, I really don't want to play the numbers game because that seems like a lot of dreadful work.
Yeah.
And I like it to be easy, like more smart rather than just like manual labor.
Heavy lifting. Yeah.
I don't want to do the heavy lifting. Like they have the problem. I have the solution. So why am I doing all the work? Like I want to learn how to get them to do all the work. I want to learn how to get them to sell themselves. I want to learn how to get them to overcome their objections. I want to learn how to get them to pull me in. And when I started doing that, quite literally selling became very, very easy and extremely profitable. And I went on to make, eventually 4 years later, I was making multiple 7 figures every year in commissions from that day forward and got into B2B sales and other stuff and made even more. And here we are,
Cool. What kind of B2B sales did you do?
So the first job was obviously alarms, B2C. And that was, we should talk about that because that was a major transition from going from B2C, alarms door to door, then getting into like, I mainly sold the next position I had I was selling debt relief services.
Okay. Yeah.
Mainly to SMB, but still a little bit of enterprise, mainly like Fortune 1000 companies, but primarily SMB. And that was a transition. Now, luckily, because I understood like human behavior, it only took me a couple months to catch on. And within 6 months, I was the number one salesperson in that entire company, like 600 reps. Went on to become the number one rep in that industry. I was in there for 5 years. Then I switched back to B2C, went into network marketing, became a top 50 earner in the entire world in that space in 4 years. You guys can even Google that, still online. And then my last position, the last 4 years, I got back into B2B sales. And I was selling like high-end like investment conferences to some companies, but also like really high net worth investors. It was kind of a mixture. And then I retired in 2017. And I'm like, I'm just going to retire. I'd done pretty well. And I think I was 39 at the time. I just turned 46. And about a year later, I was like, everybody's like, you got to start a sales training company. So I almost felt pressured to do it. And then here we are.
Here you are. Okay. Well, this is my company is an accidental company. So,
right.
I don't, that's the thing. Like, I don't imagine retiring. So it's interesting that you had kind of taken that as a thing. You were actually going to do that. You seem like a really energetic guy. You must have a lot of other hobbies. That's my problem.
I did. I mean, I invested a lot in real estate as well with my money. And I don't know. I got bored after about 3 or 4 months. I'm like, okay, like, and I'm an avid reader. I read like 5 books a month.
Oh, I couldn't tell. Not at all.
Yeah, I know, right?
There's nothing to tell me that you might like to read. There was nothing at all.
Like 3,000 books. There's only like 500 behind me, but you got. I'm crazy. I have not read all 3,000, but like 1,400 or something. But I typically, so what I do, because people always ask me like, and those like the 13 or 14 I read were all in sales, persuasion, influence, because I geek out on that stuff and psychology and all that stuff with the brain works. But I typically read about 3 books a month, and then I listen to 2 driving around.
Yeah. Like
driving around is the place to learn. My first sales event I ever went to, I think I would just turned 22. So after that summer, the company I worked for brought us to like a Brian Tracy event. You know Brian?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm good friends with Brian. He's a great guy. The first product I re-released in 2018 when I started was the Ultimate Closers Masterclass, me and Brian. It was great.
Yeah.
Followed my career. And I remember Brian on stage said something like, I could be butchering, Brian, if you're listening, but like use your car as a university on wheels.
Right.
And so I literally like took that advice from that day forward. Like I stopped listening to like, Britney Spears at the time or whoever was the famous artist. It's probably Taylor Swift now. And stopped listening to all that and like was only listening to like sales, persuasion, influence, like all the time.
Living in a place like Atlanta where the traffic's like an hour to go 10 minutes down the road. Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
So I'd go to the grocery store for 10 minutes. I had it on, I'd come back, had it on, go to the gym, have it on, go to an appointment for 30 minutes, have it on. So, I'm like putting 2 hours a day of sales, persuasion, influence in my mind 7 days a week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, it starts to add up and you start acquiring more skills than anybody else,
Very cool. So let's go to commercial break. When we get back, we'll talk about how we can apply some of the things that you're doing in potentially like the B2B space. So like, what are some mistakes you're seeing make and ways people can twist? Because this is always a topic that companies are struggling with. If they start with us on marketing, then they're like, okay, we got that working. Now do we get the sales part of the organization running? So we're talking today with Jeremy Miner. He's the founder of Seventh Level. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. We'll be back in just a minute.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger Partners. Liger Partners is a premier marketing firm where we save the world from boring, broken marketing. We get underdogs recognition because you deserve it. For more information, go to ligerpartners.com and follow us on all social media platforms at Liger Partners.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. We're talking today all things sales with Jeremy Miner. He's with Seventh Level. He's the founder of Seventh Level. He retired and then decided to start a company. My wife wishes that I would stop starting companies.
I just got bored, man. Too many people.
Well, this one happened accidentally. It's so weird. But anyway, so as so we talk, specifically that B2B space, there are a lot of companies out there, SaaS is big, right? That's like the thing that so many companies, if they have an on-premise product, they're moving to SaaS, those types of things. So talk to me a little bit like, if you're talking to a C-suite executive and their sales organization is just not working the way that they expect or hoped, like what are some key indicators, things they should start to look at? Like how do you diagnose them?
Every company is different, but I will tell you, because we have some large clients, ExxonMobil is one of our clients now. We train like 47 of their divisional vice presidents and their teams. Google Ads, we train like 4 divisions, all the way down to, a guy that owns a laundromat that wants to bring more people out, chiropractors, dentists. I mean, we train one of the largest cosmetic dentistry places in the United States up in Utah, Nuva Smiles. They're crushing it. So it's all over the place. But one core common thing that we always see is their sales process. This idea of consultative selling. I love the idea because, a lot of times in B2C sales, because we look, I just looked at our stats here couple of days ago with our CEO, and I think it was, I want to say like 71% of all of our clients come from like the B2C space.
Yeah.
Then about 29 to 30% come from the B2B space, which is normal because there's a lot more consumers than there are companies. So that's about normal. And especially in the B2B space, it's like we're conditioned that consultative selling, you got to ask questions to find the needs of the client. Like that has been drilled into B2C or B2B reps like no other, where a lot of times in B2C, it's more like boiler room selling tactics, AIDA model of selling type of things. But in a B2B, it's more consultative. And I like that. It's more persuasive than like boiler room, like pushing and pressure. But the problem is, and I love sometimes when I do these keynotes, and I'll talk about consultative selling to like a big company and they're just like, I'm just like, it's okay, it's okay. But the problem is your prospects, unfortunately, don't really know what they need when you first start talking to them. Am I right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times they'll bring in, you'll be talking to a C-level executive and they're like, well, we need this, we have this problem. And you go into like problem solving mode because hey, look, it's not your fault that you were trained to do that, but it is your what? It is your problem.
Right.
And so they, I'm selling to their needs. This is what they feel like their need. But the problem is most of your prospects don't really know what they need.
Yeah.
Now, You remember, like Steve Jobs says, hey, most of the people in the market don't really understand what they need. They might have an idea of what they need. So a company you're talking to might have an idea of what they need. They might have an idea of a problem they have, but they don't really understand the depth of the problem. Right. And they don't understand how bad the problem really is. And they especially don't understand the consequences of what happens if they don't solve that problem, if they don't do anything about it. Now, once you learn what we call it NEPQ, Neuro Emotional Persuasion Questioning, that's our methodology. It's from my behavioral science geeky background. We're not going to train you just to help the prospect just to sell to their needs. We're going to show you questions to ask and how to use your tone to get the prospect to open up and go below the surface and build a gap from where they are. A lot of people call that their current state to where they want that to be. We call that their objective state. Current state, objective state. Okay. Now, what's the gap in the middle? Well, the gap in the middle is determined by you, the salesperson, not by the prospect, because they might come to you with they think they have this gap. And so you start selling to this gap, and then you're stunned that they don't move forward with your solution.
Right.
Okay. That's the problem. So we want to know how to open them up and help the prospect find problems that they didn't even know they have. Now, that's a concept called problem finding. I was always taught, especially when I got into B2B sales, hey, you got to be a great problem solver. Like every book back here says you got to be a problem solver. But as I started to conceptualize that, because that's just the way my mind works, I'm like, well, you can't really be a problem solver unless they buy.
Right.
Like how are you a problem solver if they don't buy?
Yeah.
Well, you're not, because you don't solve the problem until they buy and implement whatever you sold. So problem solving, if you really think about it, I know it's a catchphrase for salespeople, but in reality, problem solving doesn't happen until after they purchase. Really.
Yep.
If you want a lot of people to buy, you have to be really good at problem finding. Okay. And that's asking the right questions at the right time with the right tone that starts to build a gap in their mind from where they are compared to where they want to be. Okay. So not just helping them find one problem, but also helping them find maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other problems that they didn't realize they had. Now, when you build that big of a gap, it is impossible for them, literally, to not buy what you're offering, because nobody else can build a gap like that. They come in, oh, you got the need, here's how we solve it. And then they see that one little problem. They're like, well, I mean, we got the problem, but we could probably solve that internally. See, when we go in, when our clients go in, they're not looking at just the problem they said they had. They're starting to problem find and finding 4 or 5 other problems. And by the time they leave, that prospect's like, holy hell, we've got this problem and that problem we didn't even think about. So now they're like attached to you.
Yeah.
They're like pulling you back in, like I've got all these
falling through. Yeah.
Yeah. So and that builds massive urgency in the sale. Yeah. So if you've got a 12-month sales cycle, that's how we teach you to get that down to 3 or 4 months. Yeah. Or you get a 6-month sales. So how do you get that down to 1 or 2 months, right? And I can even tell you a story about a Fortune 100 company that I closed in a 2-call close. Mm-hmm. How's that even possible? Now, I still had to go through legal, but it was less than 2 weeks. Right. How's that even possible? Problem finding, helping them find 7, 8 problems where they're just like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. Massive urgency. And that's what I find in B2B sales is we go in there and we follow concepts like BANT. And in the first 3 minutes, we're like, well, what's your budget for this type of thing? Well, the problem is, how can the prospect know what their budget needs to be in the first 5 minutes when they don't even really understand what their problems are yet?
And they've defined it. So often when I work with them, they've defined the wrong problem. It's like,
exactly.
They don't even know the words they're using. You're like, it's saying the right word.
Yeah, it's like you're a doctor.
Yeah.
So a patient comes into you, right? So you're the doctor, the salesperson. The prospect comes into you, they're the patient, and they're like, hey, my back hurts. And you're like, oh, your back hurts? Where does it hurt? Oh, how long has it been hurting? Oh, okay, well, here, why don't you go take this medicine and this shot and you should be good. I mean, that's literally what you've been taught to do.
Right.
And then they go and do it, and they're like, well, that didn't even work. Like, my back still hurts.
Right.
See, what we would do is we would teach you, like, the right questions, opening them up, and then you might find out that they have a tumor in their back.
Yeah.
Because you opened them up and they found all these problems and they got a scan and they have a tumor, then they had a successful surgery. Now they're healed. Whereas you were the salesperson because you couldn't open them up. Now they died because they didn't know what they needed. They didn't know what their real problem was.
Well, what's interesting about what you're talking about is that's how we steal from, we don't call ourselves an agency, we call ourselves a firm because we're more comprehensive on marketing. And we steal clients all the time because they are experiencing exactly what you said. The firm doesn't know anything that's talking, or the agency doesn't know what they're saying. They're asking them, and they're like, I don't know. If I knew, I wouldn't be talking to you.
I wouldn't be coming to you if I know what the problem was.
Yeah, right. And I love my clients they don't get it, they don't want it, they don't have the capacity. So that whole kind of like EOS kind of thing. So if you can get the client into that kind of, and you can make so much more money in those kind of deals anyway,
because you help them get what they want.
And then they come to you with everything. They're like, hey, could you fix this for me too? It's like, yeah.
Yeah, you know why? Because they view you as more of the expert, what we call the trusted authority, who's going to get them where they want to be. Whereas they view all the other salespeople, asking them a few consultative questions and going in their pitch, you know how they view them? Just another salesperson trying to sell me something. So they just put you over here and they commoditize you.
And well, within your B2B, so companies like rigor and structure, like things to hit certain stages, and they like da. So is that something you can apply the way you're going through? Like, do they know how far a deal is going? How does that work for them, right? Like when you're talking to...
Are you asking like on the salesperson, how they speed up the deal? Or
no, like when you're getting hired by a company. This company's like, we think our sales is broken, right? It's broken. And so, but they like the rigor, right? Like we've got this 7-step process, and some of them drive us crazy. Like they'll pitch us a piece of software and it takes us 4 calls for them to like find I'm like, stop, like just what do you got? Okay. So how do you get objections around that, or does your system allow you to kind of let know where things are?
We're probably pretty good at getting them to maybe see things they'd never thought about before, because what we're talking about, like, most salespeople have been trained that you've got to push, you've got to pressure and like externally persuade, which is only going to get you to a certain level. And that's it, especially today's, like, people don't want to be pressured and
so be sold to.
Yeah, exactly. So we train salespeople organizations to get the prospect to internalize internal persuasion. And what that means, we call that internal tension. See, there's a difference between internal tension compared to external sales pressure, right? External sales pressure comes from you. Internal tension comes from you as well, but it helps the prospect to feel so much tension that they feel they have no choice but to want to change. And it's them deciding they want to change. I always ask this, what's the biggest emotional driver in a human being that causes them to want to change? It's 2 things. It's pain.
Yep.
And it's the fear of future pain. Those are the 2 biggest emotional drivers that cause a prospect to voluntarily themselves want to change. And that is internal persuasion. So it's their idea. And what we train salespeople in organizations to do is basically facilitate that.
Yeah.
So you're like the facilitator, just taking them on this journey.
Well, and you're
get to self-realize.
Well, into the B2B space, you're making them look like a hero internally, which is such a huge part of it, right? Like they want their boss's job, they want to look important, they whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, take complete credit for this.
Yes. So we won't do deals. We literally will get on there, like our people that handle, big organizations. And we'll get on there and we'll just say, hey, I want to make sure you understand, we're going to go through this. We'll go through this proposal with you. But we if we're going to do this and train your salespeople to help you get to X, Y, Z, whatever they said they wanted. Let's say they want to scale to 1.5 billion a year and they're at 600 million a year right now. Okay. Like we can help you get there. But if we have no control of what your reps are learning, if we have no way to like train your sales management to make sure they're actually training them what we're training them, then we just don't do the deal, because it hurts our reputation, because you're not going to get the results you want. So if you want to get to 1.5 billion, you're just, like I said, we're always focused on the result they said they want, not the price.
Yep.
We're getting results-based thinking, not price or cost-based thinking. That's a no-no in sales. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're like, we can help you get there, but it has to be with what we're going to train you guys to get there. And if you guys are like, hey, we don't want to do that, we don't want our sales managers involved, we're probably just going to say no.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we flip the script, because we realize that we're not the ones as a sales training company that has the problems.
Right.
They have the problems.
Yeah, it's a great way to identify that ideal client, because we look for marketing, not an emergency. It's got to be an investment, like the whole thing.
You have the problems, we have the solution, we can get you there, But if you go outside of how we know how to get you there, then there's nothing we can do for you, and we'd rather just say no.
Yep.
And they're like, no, we don't. No, we'll do it. Because we're like dead serious. We would rather not do it. I don't care if it pays us $1 million a year. We will say no, because if they don't get the results they want, who are they going to blame?
You.
They're going to blame us.
Yeah. It's not.
You know what I mean,
it's not a good relationship at the end of the day. Totally agree.
Exactly. So, and that typically causes 90% of them to want to move forward, because they realize like these guys are actually serious. Like, they can actually do what they say they can do.
Yeah, it's a great takeaway. It reminds several of the deals that I've sold, because I'm not a natural salesperson like you.
I'm definitely not a natural salesperson. I had to learn those skills.
Yeah. Well, but funny, it's several things early in your career where you would get somebody to a point of frustration and you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they're like, oh, let me sign the contract. You're like, what? No, I'm like angry at you. I don't want to do the deal, right? Because they've, taken so long to make the decision. So, well, yeah, really interesting. We're at the end of our time, but it's been great kind of talking with you. You've got a lot of great stuff. So I will definitely make sure we put in the show notes how to get to your training and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. If they, I know we didn't have time to get into like tactical training. They usually don't on a podcast, but if they want some nibbles, we'll give them some nibbles. We always say we'll give you some hors d'oeuvres. We won't even make you pay for those. Best place to find some hors d'oeuvres from us, we'll give you some free training, is we'll have them join one of our Facebook groups. The one that they should probably join, because you specialize in B2B, and there's a lot of B2C people in there too, but a lot of B2B, is have them go to salesrevolution.pro. I want to say there's 80-some thousand sales people in there,
nice.
A lot of B2B, and just they can join that for free. We go live in there 2-3 times a week, myself, different sales trainers we have over the world. We give them like subject matter trains, Q&As. We interview clients from all industries, break down their sales process. And so they can join that for free. And then we have a Wall Street Journal bestseller book that was just released 3 months ago. You can find this in all your Barnes & Noble bookstores. And I believe we probably maybe sent you a link to Barnes & Noble's website, but you can go on barnesandnobles.com, buy this thing. Now, here's my only thing here. I'm going to get upset if you guys buy this book from Amazon, even though I love Amazon. Okay. We're an Amazon bestseller too, but we have a big deal with Barnes & Noble. So in Barnes & Noble, this costs like $17.78. Now, full disclaimer, you can get it for about 87 cents cheaper on Amazon. However, we have no deal with Amazon. We have a big deal with Barnes & Noble. So I would suggest that you spend the extra 87 cents, because if I find out you bought it on Amazon, I think we're going to be very angry. If you guys come to us for training and you bought a book from Amazon, we're going to say no. So you got to go to Barnes & Noble, buy the book. It's a new model of selling. Me and Jerry Acuff wrote this. He's the CEO of Delta Point, a pretty large consulting firm on the East Coast. He specializes in more pharmaceutical sales. We're in everything sales all over the world. And we put a lot of tactical training in this sucker, because it always pissed me off when I would read sales books in my younger years. It was always just theory and repeated theory 17 times. And then the book, like, I didn't learn anything.
Yeah.
So this is actually like tactical training, what questions to ask and why. That psychology behind them from each stage, from connection stage all the way to, the commitment stage to closing the deal. And yeah, I think you guys might like that book. It's a big orange one. Barnes & Noble.
I like it. Orange is our color. I like it. So thank you so much.
That's right.
Yeah. So thanks so much for joining us on the call. We've been talking today with Jeremy Miner. He's the founder of Seventh Level. If you want to level up your sales, you should check him out. We'll put all the information that he talked about in.
They don't have to, though. They don't want to sell more. They don't have.
Everybody wants to sell more. So they're only doing marketing to sell more. So thank you for tuning into the call. And until next time.